Heaven's Dessert, Chapter 1, Richie the Lion-Hearted. Richie was born on a cold and snowy, wintry day in a small town, and his due date was Christmas Eve. It was so cold that winter, few dared to even go out. He could even feel his mother shivering, even in the womb. It was not enough that Richie had felt very unsettled in his mother's womb because he could always hear loud but muffled noises, and now he was even cold. For many months, his mother's room was like an echo chamber. He could feel his mother tremble many times, and when a loud voice would come up, he thought, "What is this?" He became fearful in the womb and did not want to come out. He thought, who would want to come into a new and strange place that had screaming, arguing, and stress? The fear of the unknown got him so sad he just wanted to die. He thought, "Mama, can't you do something?" But something inside of him said, "Do not fear. I am with you. Peace and quietness will come to this house one day. Have faith in Father God." He thought, who's Father God? Chapter 2, Manna for Mama. On Christmas Eve, Richie was finally born. What an experience, thought Richie. It felt like he was being wrung out like a washcloth and also falling headfirst into a world of noisy confusion. He thought, what was this strange place with all kinds of different people? He opened his eyes and he saw light for the first time. He was so blinded by the light, he felt fearful. He cried out for fear. Something that embraced him tightly, and that person shielded his eyes from the light. His eyes burned. With fear and trembling, he slowly opened his eyes and saw it was a lady with a very large smile. He smiled back, and her smile slowly changed as she cried tears of joy. They looked like golden raindrops falling from her big brown eyes. Her eyes were so bright he could see himself in them. He had never seen himself before either, especially in the dark. He thought, wow, I look like a golden boy. My hair is golden, my eyes are brown. Hey, I look pretty good. Richie was happy for a few hours, and then he felt a pain in his stomach. He thought, what is this? Here I was so happy, and now I have stomach pains? Are you serious? Richie cried out as loud as he could. His mother put him up to her breast, and Richie thought, oh no, she's going to smother me because I cried so loud and I'm going to die. Oh no, ah! Richie kicked and screamed some more. Oh! His mother then gently rocked him and touched his lips with her breast, and as she looked at God's gift to her, her love for Richie came to mind. This activated her milk that tasted like milk and honey. It came down and it flowed. Richie thought, wow, what is this sweet taste? Did I really die and go to heaven? All I had in the womb was food my mother had eaten, and by the time it got to me, it was like eating leftovers. Yuck! But this is like having dessert. It must be from heaven. This must be Mama's manna from heaven. Wow! It is amazing what the power of love can create. The dessert of heaven. The older Richie became, the more he was taken to the kitchen table to eat with the family. There was always some kind of noise or commotion going on. He often wondered where he'd heard those same voices. One was a voice of anger, and the other voice, his mother's, was that of a peaceful voice. Her voice seemed to calm the conversations. At times, though, the louder voice would get really loud, and then the sound of falling silverware, broken plates, and furniture breaking made my mother cry. He thought, who is this person that is making my mother cry? Why is he even here in this house? Richie learned to glare at this person with an ugly face and roar like a lion to try to put fear in this strange person. Richie rarely saw his mother cry. She would usually go into another room. He did not even understand what crying was, because crying to him was all about getting something. But this is a cry that was foreign to him. This was a cry of sorrow. He now remembered hearing that cry and that same loud voice and other noises in his mother's womb. This time, though, the muffled echoes were now blaring in his head that made him tremble. He now felt and understood fear. All he could do was cry out very loud, and the loud noises would stop. He had no idea that a roar could be so powerful to control people and how they spoke. One Christmas day a few years later, Richie watched his mother at the kitchen table take some oval-shaped stuff and put it in her mouth. She called them white beans. I could tell by the way she chewed she did not like them. But that is all they could afford because they were so poor. He watched and studied her as she chewed it over and over. Richie was getting hungry now, and he cried out for some manna. To his surprise, she took the mashed beans out of her mouth and forced it into his mouth, taking her fingers and working his jaw up and down until he swallowed the mashed beans. Richie choked and tried to cry out, but no words came forth. He thought, "What a gross thing to do! Not leftovers again! I want my manna! You might as well stuff my mouth with an old washcloth. I want my manna!" Richie thought, "I will get back at her now. How could she be so mean to me?" Richard then spit upon his mother, and she looked at him in amazement. She said with a loud voice, bad boy, off to bed you go." He had never heard his mother raise her voice at him. This stunned him, and he cried. He thought, "I feel all alone in a house that nobody really cares for me." He was so sad he cried himself into a deep sleep, and then he dreamed a very vivid dream. In his dream, he saw a great and noble saber-toothed lion named Richard. That lion lived in Siberia. Richard was his own king there. Only the strong could survive in a climate that severe. One day he felt it was time to find a mate, so he started wandering in the wind-driven snow and then lost his way. All he knew was to keep going downhill, and the further he went, the warmer it got. The snow finally turned to rain, and it got warmer and warmer. The sun came out, and it got very warm. He started to sweat, and bugs now started to come and bother him. He did not know what bugs were because bugs lived only a short time in Siberia. He had never gone this far down the mountain before, but he had no choice. He kept hearing a voice telling him, "Go down the mountain to a garden called Milk and Honey." He replied, "Whoever you are, lead me. I do not know the way." On the way down, he got hungry and needed to eat something soon because his energy was failing. He knew if he did not eat something soon, he would go into a rage and then a deep sleep that could cause death. He is now alone in a dense forest, and there were no animals in sight, so he could eat. He thought, "What a strange place to be, and there is no meat to eat. I'm going to starve to death." Richard walked slowly and carefully, and his paws were now sticking to the ground as he walked. He thought, "Yuck, this feels terrible." He put down his nose to see what kind of glue that smelled so sweet. He then put his tongue very slowly and carefully to the ground for fear it might get stuck. He touched the glue-like stuff and swiftly pulled his tongue back into his mouth, and his eyes got real wide. He roared, and a smile came across his face. "Wow, this tastes awesome." He tasted more and then ate all he could, and he leaped for joy with an energy he never knew. He had never felt so much strength before. Leaping and dancing now, he would twist and turn until he got dizzy and then just fell down and slept. He woke up and could hardly stand from the weight of the honey on his body. He thought, "Why did I lay down in this honey? What was I thinking? What would other animals think if they saw me, the king of the beasts, in a perfumed fur coat and an ugly mane that was all matted down? My image would be ruined. I have to take a bath quickly, somehow, before being seen." Richard walked slowly in search of water. He now felt the heaviness of the honey. He kept looking around to make sure no one was watching. He finally found a large pool of white water fed by a white-looking waterfall that sounded like soft running water. "Funny-looking water, but I must take a bath," he thought. He started to step into the pool, and he heard a noise of laughter. He looked around but could not turn completely because he was now stuck with hardened honey. The honey had dried now, and he felt helpless. The laughter came again, but this time he realized it was the laugh of a lion. Now he felt humiliated. He was king of the mountain one day, and the next day just a weak lion in a honey-coated fur coat. He turned red with embarrassment now, and now he looked like a honey-roasted lion. The laugh he now heard turned into a laughter that roared. It was deafening as it echoed in his mind. Richard now saw a lioness come towards him. He was much bigger than her and not even afraid of her. Usually the lioness is very afraid of the male lion because they are very aggressive and will just have to roar to get their way. The lioness smiled and walked slowly around Richard. She tried not to laugh, but she could not help it. Then she smiled and said, "Well, hello, big boy. You look pretty sweet to me." She then fell on the ground, rolled and roared with laughter. Richard turned to her and said, "Go ahead, laugh, and show how ignorant you really are. Can't you see I'm stuck?" She laughed even harder. He had no choice but to now laugh at himself. He said, "I do look pretty stupid, don't I?" He said, "I came here because I heard that this was a garden called Milk and Honey. I did not know it was everywhere. The honey, anyhow." He chuckled and sheepishly said, "I guess I got more than I needed. Well, don't just stand there. Help me. If you care, help me into this pool of milky water. The honey is hardening and I can hardly move." The lioness shook her head with a wide grin and walked away and stopped about 50 feet away. Richard cried out, "Where are you going? You can't leave me like this." Then she cried, "You want help? Then show me some respect and take back what you said about me being ignorant." Richard was shocked, sheepishly replied, "Oh, okay, I am sorry. Can you please forgive me?" She smiled and said, "Well, yes, of course." She then roared and she ran towards him and then stopped dead in her tracks, looking deep into his eyes. He said, "Well, what are you doing?" Before he could finish the question, she turned and went around him and kicked him with her hind legs, and off he went into the milky water. She then rolled and laughed with great joy. She thought, revenge can be so sweet, just like honey. He was stunned. He thought, though, after falling into the milky water, that the honey would just fall off. It didn't. He was so heavy now, he was now drowning and had to cry out for help. The lioness, now startled and in fear, jumped into the water and dragged him to the shore. Both exhausted now, all they could do was to comfort each other as they breathed deeply. Richard said, "Wow, you saved my life. Who are you anyway, and why are you here?" She thought and replied, "I do not know why I'm here. I came from a long ways away as I heard a voice say to me, 'Go north to a garden called Milk and Honey.' So I went." "So what is your name anyhow?" he cried. "My name is Bethany. I used to live in the desert where all the lions were either killed by men or they starved to death. I am the only one that survived." Richard looked puzzled, thought, and then asked, "Don't you find it strange that we were both brought to this place, this garden called Milk and Honey? Why is it that we both heard the same voice out of nowhere and that we were brought to this place?" Richard thought and then said, "I now know that there must be a creator that protects his creation so none can become extinct." Bethany looked at Richard with tears in her eyes. She then said, trembling, "I think that we were destined to meet." He replied, "I think you are right." Bethany got close to him, then realized she was stuck to him. He then began to lick her clean of the milk and honey as she did the same for him. Wow! Together, they thought, we both taste like tapioca pudding. What a great combination we make. After they were both clean, their eyes met and they kissed each other until their hearts roared. They were now one. Then they lay down to take a nice long nap. They were so tired, the nap seemed like a year had gone by. As they napped, they both dreamed about having a lion baby one day. Richard awoke to something biting him on the face. He opened his eyes and was startled to see a baby lying in his face with a big smile. He then looked at Bethany, and she smiled and said, "Son, this is your daddy, and Dad, this is your son, Tapioca." The dream ended, and Richie awoke. He called out to his mother, "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy, I have to tell you something." Richie's mother jumped and ran into the bedroom. Richie's father was also taking a nap and was dreaming and overheard the dream. He then opened his eyes, realizing that he was to stop this arguing by remembering that God brought the two of them together and gifted them with Richie. He wept. He now understood that this gift from God, his son, was to be cherished and kept in peace at all times. He got on his knees and prayed for God to help him become the father that he desired.